Welcome to the Astropsyche. This is your weekly astrology forecast for June 23rd through the 29th. This week we have a mixture of different energies. We have a new moon in the sign of Cancer, and this new moon is important because it is activating and highlighting some aspects that have been more long-term, slow-moving, sort of background energy. And this new moon is moving these aspects into the foreground. And so we're going to talk about that, particularly Jupiter in Cancer making a square to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And so this new moon is an activator. It's bringing things forward, and I can also feel it it feels in true Cancerian nature very wave-like, where there is this building that will continue over the next month and next many months. We can think of this new moon as bringing more into the foreground, bringing more into our material experience. And then Mercury is making several aspects. So we're going to talk about how our perception may be changing quite frequently this week and quite dramatically. My name is Shauna McGrath. I'm a depth psychotherapist and an astrologer, and I'm so honored to share the astrology of this week with you from a depth psychological perspective. So, we're going to start at the beginning, and I'm going to talk about the aspects that the sun is making. And we're also keeping in mind that this is involving the new moon in Cancer, because new moon is the moon and the sun coming together. So, first, we have the sun in the sign of Cancer making a square to Neptune. And so this has been softly present since the sun moved into the sign of Cancer last week. This week, it's exact. So it's more present, it's more at its peak energy. And the sun is a symbol of our ego, our sense of self with a capital S. The sun, because it has this symbolism around being the center and the orienting principle, that center point that everything orients around, it has this centering gravitational force to it within the psyche. That is its symbolism. And in this case, psychologically, we would consider that the ego. The ego literally means the me, the me-ness. Um, Originally, when Freud came up with the term ego in German, it actually meant the me. And so we can think of the ego as, and the sun for that matter, as a symbol of the things that we identify with, that we're like, yes, this is me, this is how I am. I am this kind of person. I have this kind of role. And often the sun points to the things that we consciously identify with. The sun is a symbol of our conscious awareness, it is the spotlight. And Neptune is a symbol of dissolving, of altered states of consciousness, of the unseen. Neptune is very classically connected to the unconscious. And so when we have these planets coming together, there can be a couple of different things. There can be this softening of the sense of self, softening of the ego. We can also think of it as dissolving some of the egoic structures, and that may look like dissolving some things about yourself, and the way that you identify might be shifting and changing and transforming. And I think that when we have Sun Neptune in combination, whether that's a transit collectively or in the birth chart, this aspect often invokes this question, who am I? And it can be sort of this meditative, seeking, constantly seeking question, because who are you? Particularly, who are you when we remove all material, concrete things? So, for example, someone may identify with their profession, their job, their vocation, their role in their family, being a mom or a daughter or a partner, being a person that is very active, or being a person that's creative, or being a person who is patient or passionate, etc., etc. The sun shows us all of the things that we identify with, and Neptune tends to soften that and create some space for things to fall away as well as new things to come in. And so that might be part of the experience this week. Um, and I think that we can also really work with this by cultivating a sense of active surrender. This aspect, Sun square Neptune, to me feels very much like the hanged person in Tarot, where there's this um, awareness, there's a presence with that card, the hanged person in the Tarot. There's a presence, but there's also an inaction. There's a surrender, but a wakeful surrendering. Feels very much like Sun Neptune. So I'll also say it can be very easy when we have Sun Neptune to feel overwhelmed by this question of who am I, or it can be overwhelming to feel like your sense of self is being questioned or your role is being questioned in some way. And of course, this really depends on what's happening in your life and your personal temperament. And so I think that this is why it's so helpful to find a sense of grounding when we have Sun Neptune, and to also cultivate a sense of softness, this uh, this being present. And if there is any gripping or tension or anxiety, finding ways to soften that and finding ways to really notice what's happening and where we're being led, where there is an opening, where there is a sense of flow. And particularly with Neptune, often it feels very ambiguous and very unclear. So there may not be a clear path forward. There might be some, doesn't quite feel like there's movement either way. And so I'm not quite sure what might be happening for you, but if that's the case, if there's no clear feeling of yesness, then that typically means, okay, we're going to sit with what is and watch and wait, because things are always changing. Things are always changing in general, and Neptune also has this changeable, shape-shifty kind of quality. Now, we're also keeping in mind that the Sun is making a square to Saturn, because Saturn and Neptune are very close together in the sign of Aries. So the Sun made its exact square to Saturn last week, but Saturn's still in the mix here. And so there's still this quality of finding a practical way to have a sense of self, a sense of identity. Um, Sun Saturn is very much about making things real, making things practical, bolstering the sense of confidence through taking action in small but consistent ways. I think that both Sun to Saturn and Sun to Neptune, there's this quality of devotion, there's this quality of presence and showing up and being aware as much as we can muster. Now, again, of course, Neptune can sometimes show where we become unconscious, and we all do this because we cannot be 100% conscious all of the time. As far as I can tell, our psychic structure just doesn't work that way. So, I think it's quite possible that this week you might realize ways that maybe there has been some unconscious things that have been happening, whether that is um, beliefs or ways of being or patterns of behavior. Um, I kind of feel like because we're in a new moon period and because of many of the Mercury aspects that I'm going to talk about today, it feels like some of this is more looking at the way that you feel on the inside versus behavior. Often those things are interconnected, of course. But there's something sort of internal about this where this almost, particularly speaking to the Sun Neptune, this almost feels like um, becoming more aware of what you identify with or what you identify as, and that there's something here that's changing and shifting, and that your belief about who you are as a person, there's something that's transforming here. Now, also, the Sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter this week. And so, again, this is an energy that we've been building towards as both the Sun and Jupiter have recently moved into the sign of Cancer. And it's this week that they are coming together at the same exact degree in the zodiac. And so there's um, this complete merging of the Sun and Jupiter energies together. And so, of course, we said the Sun is the ego, the sense of self. I think the Sun can also be a symbol of our vitality, our inner spark, our energy, like the that part of us that is excited to get up and be who we are. The Sun can also be a symbol of paternal figures or people who are in leadership positions or positions of authority in some way. The Sun has this leadership sort of quality to it. And so often it can be archetypally symbolizing experiences where someone is in a place of influence or in a place of being very visible or being very seen. And when we have Jupiter, Jupiter is the planet of more. Jupiter is the planet of expansion and growth and opening up more possibilities. And also, Jupiter can, we're always looking at the full spectrum of things, I think, I hope. That is my hope for us, is that we can have a very wide view, a very wide scope of all of the possibilities. And with Jupiter, it's very easy to assume that Jupiter is wonderful, optimistic, hopeful qualities, which it is. And also because Jupiter has this quality of growth and expansion and wanting more, this can sometimes feel like overwhelm. It can sometimes feel like um, things are happening too much, too fast, or that we can't process and digest what is happening. In the pacing feels like it's a lot, like it's more than we can digest psychologically at the moment. And I think that also too, particularly sometimes Sun Jupiter can symbolize feelings or experiences of intrusion or engulfment, where it's like almost like a wave washing over you. And that can be overwhelming, scary, paralyzing when we don't know how to respond to that feeling. I think that engulfment sort of can create this feeling of freezing or hiding and or trying to ignore, trying to numb, and things like this. So I wanted to name this because I think that is also a part of the Jupiterian experience. And so I think that this really depends on, again, of course, your life situation, your temperament, and it also really depends on where we're at in our life and how we're able to manage the energy that's coming at us. And I think that also our experience sometimes of planets like this can, we can also look to intersections of marginalization and privilege, and that can tell us where there may be either protection against or vulnerability towards an experience that maybe feels overwhelming or that feels challenging in some way. Because our marginalization and privilege and the combination of those things tells us how much uh, our level of resources, inner resources and outer resources. And when we have Jupiterian energy, if we are already feeling maxed out or overwhelmed or dysregulated, it can sometimes feel like it's adding to that. And so I think that um, particularly because this is keying into the new moon, there's a lot to process here. Jupiter really wants to, it's like an archetypal energy. There's a hunger for experiencing, there's a hunger for learning. Jupiter tends to show times where we really look at the big picture and we try to look at either the philosophy behind something. Sometimes it can go into looking at the ideal behind something and maybe where the ideal is possible but not happening and how to get there. Like I really feel this with this combination here with Sun and Jupiter in Cancer making a square to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. There's a lot of energy here around imagining what is possible and imagining what can be, what should be, what could be, and then the practical realities of that. And that there is a finiteness to our human experience. And so I feel like the sort of like pressing against that. And if overwhelm is present, if you're having that experience of Jupiter, it really helps to, as much as you can, slow down, simplify, and ask yourself what you need in the moment to connect to your center. And even when we can't access whatever it is that we need, um, sometimes simply naming it within ourselves can have this centering, orienting impact because we're connecting in as best as we can. And so, yeah, I don't quite know what may be coming up for you here, but it feels like a lot of big energy, and it feels also like there are some big questions too around possibly role and identity and how you view yourself, how you feel that you fit into this world. The sun is also making a subtle sextile aspect to Mars, Mars being freshly in Virgo. And this is a subtle aspect that shows where there might be a subtle boost of vitality or maybe taking action or maybe being direct, which is very Mars, that being direct or action oriented may be helpful to you in some way. So yeah, I'm curious how this is landing with you so far and how this is feeling and how it's connecting into your experience. Mm. I want to say also, I think that when we have the sun connected into Jupiter and Neptune, like we do this week, there's also this enlivening of our intuition, of synchronicity, of extrasensory experiences of any kind. And sometimes our intuition can be very subtle, where we don't even realize that we had an intuition until after the fact. And so that's something that feels very alive this week as well. And um, I think that our feelings, well, is this true? I'm gonna pause here for a moment. I was gonna say something very generalized, and I don't quite know that I agree with that. So, um, one way that we connect with our intuition is through our feelings. And for example, when we feel anxiety about something, um, that's telling us something. Sometimes anxiety is that we had a past experience that didn't go the way that we wanted, and so now we're nervous that that may be repeated. But sometimes anxiety is an intuitive protective function, and only you can discern over time what your personal indicators are, whether that's somatic or feeling or an inner knowing. And through paying attention to how you are feeling, whether that is physically in your body, like literal sensations that you have in your body, or the feelings that you're having, or the things that you're thinking about. And the more that you can pay attention to the events that are happening around you and sort of viewing the events around you as symbolics or almost as if it's a waking dream, the more that you do that, the more that you're going to be able to hone in on your sense of intuition and synchronicities. And I'm saying that because um, sometimes we have an intuition, and when there's a lot of big energy like this, it can be um, where things are happening so fast and we don't realize in the moment what is actually happening. And so I know for myself, uh, it sometimes takes me a couple of hours, a couple of days, sometimes weeks to process how I actually feel about something, depending on what it is. And the more, mm, like, the more activating the phenomenon is for me, usually the longer it takes me to process. And so I would be very gentle with yourself. I would notice what you're noticing, but then also know that sometimes it takes time to process. And um, our feelings or intuitions are not always incredibly concrete and clear. And sometimes we have to kind of mm, follow one thread to get to another path that wouldn't have happened if we followed this one thread, but this one thread didn't work out. So it feels like a failure, but it actually was this stepping stone or this bridge. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Tell me how that sounds for you. So let's talk about the new moon. So the new moon is highlighting all of this energy with the sun to Neptune, the sun to Jupiter, the sun to Mars. Our new moon in Cancer is happening Wednesday, June 25th. It's exact at 3:32 a.m. in the morning Pacific time. So uh, I think for most of us in the world, it's happening Wednesday, but it might possibly be into Thursday, depending on where you are in the world. And it's happening at 4 degrees of Cancer, so fairly early in the sign. And this new moon is happening very close to Jupiter, Jupiter in Cancer, and it's also making a very close square to Neptune and to Saturn. And so, anytime we have this new moon, anytime we have a new moon, it is about new beginnings, planting new seeds. It's about the initiation of things. So, it's not when a new thing happens necessarily, but it's usually the subtle, seemingly insignificant beginning of things. And this can be the arising of an idea, the spontaneous connection with another person. Um, it can be a feeling. I think that when we have a new moon in Cancer, there's a particular focus on emotions, intuition, particularly emotional security, and how we feel a sense of emotional safety, how we feel a sense of community connection, whether that is a community that we were born into or a community of our choosing, our chosen family, so to speak. And there's also with Cancerian energy a theme around healing in general. And so, in some ways, a new moon in Cancer is a soft, soothing energy. And then we have Jupiter creating this expansion, creating this desire to explore all of the emotions, to explore all of the intuitions. And then Neptune bringing in this sensitized. I can also think of Neptune as like tuning the radio of your sensory experience. And so Neptune tends to show where it's like, okay, we're adjusting the dial so that we can get a better signal on things. And then Saturn, of course, bringing in the reminder of responsibilities, of practicalities. Saturn bringing in the reminder to have a devotional practice, to have a commitment to things that are important to us. And so all of this combined, like I really feel some oomph to this particular new moon. Um, and of course, this we can look more for you on what area of life there is this initiation, this new beginning by looking at which house in your birth chart is ruled by Cancer. And that house represents an area of life, whether it is one on one relationships, community, groups, your career, your finances, your debt management, your health, etc. Usually, you kind of already have a feeling of where there is something new that is beginning. And the astrology simply helps us to verify and to validate and to deepen into this. And we can also, you may also wish to reflect on how you have grown, developed, transformed since we had our last connection with a lunation in the sign of Cancer. So, since the last new moon a month ago on May 26th, how have things changed for you? What experiences have you had since then? Um, How have you changed since the last full moon in Cancer about 6 months ago in January of 2025? And how have things changed for you at the last new moon in Cancer a year ago, so July 2024? And this can kind of get you into the feeling of what might be emerging. And it's not that the same exact things are going to happen, but there's an archetypal similarity here, that this place, this quality, this area of life for you is being highlighted, activated. There's something new that's being planted here. There's something new that wants to be nourished in your life and in you. So, yeah, curious how you're feeling. Now, we're going to shift to Mercury because Mercury is doing some things. So, Mercury is currently, let's see, let me look at my chart here. Okay, yes. So, Mercury is also in Cancer at the moment, and it's farther away from all of this new moon stuff. Mercury is at the last part of Cancer, and Mercury actually moves into Leo this week. But before it does, Mercury makes a square to Chiron, and it also makes a sextile to Uranus. And this combination to me feels very um, emphasized around having a healing experience, particularly a healing experience around your mind, how you analyze things, how you think, or how you communicate. All Mercury stuff. So, Mercury is the mind, thoughts, communication. Mercury is uh, how we make sense of things, the stories that we tell in our mind, and it's how we share, transmit, bring things from one place or person to another, thus communication. Um, Mercury is also a symbol of things like business and marketing, and it's the mercantile quality, this commerce sort of quality, and it's also connected to divination. Divination is this connection between a person and the other world. And so Mercury is this go between. This Mercury is a symbol of the psychopomp, the figure that guides souls from one realm to another. And so when we have Chiron coming into an aspect with Mercury, there is something here around, could be a couple different things. Around there's something here around uh, tending to a vulnerability, tending to something that maybe has been challenging or tender or something that maybe has hurt in the past. And there is attention that is drawn to that area for the purpose of bringing some help or some healing, bringing some repair to that phenomenon. Chiron also symbolizes the mentor, the teacher, and that function of becoming more of who you are, developing the skills and the qualities to be to do more of your work in the world, so to speak. And it also is the function of being that for other people, helping other people see themselves or become more of themselves. I think at the core of it, Chiron is very much about integration. It's very much about how either we for ourselves collect back parts of ourselves and bring a sense of care to ourselves, and how maybe we do that for others. So there's something here, possibly, around a challenge around communication, thoughts, or maybe self talk, or maybe an internalized perspective that's ready for healing. When we see Chiron, I think there is an indication that there is something in the psyche that wants some attention, that wants some tending to, that wants some healing, and that there's a readiness for it. This could also, in a more practical way, I think, signal a connection with a mentor or a teacher, or maybe connecting with your own innate healing or mentorship qualities. So it could be something inside, could be something external. You'll have to tell me kind of what's happening for you and what's coming up for you as I'm sharing these things. And then Mercury making the sextile to Uranus. This is a subtle addition to this aspect, and I think it just adds the possibility for a rapid or unexpected shift or change. Uranus is unburdening, liberating, and doing things eclectically different. And I think it just that it's happening particularly with Mercury square Chiron, I think a adds a sort of a click, and you're like, whoa, oh, okay, it wasn't that hard. Something like this. It doesn't have to be that hard. I think is kind of what Uranus wants to remind us. Now, okay, so that's all while Mercury is still in the sign of Cancer. And so we have that happening, Mercury with Chiron. We have the new moon that's happening on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, sort of on just on the heels of the new moon, we have Mercury moving into the sign of Leo. And this is happening Thursday, June 26th. And Mercury is going to be here for a while in the sign of Leo. Typically, Mercury is in a sign for about 3 weeks at a time. So it moves pretty quick, moves a little bit faster than the sun. But in this case, Mercury will be in Leo from June 26th through September 2nd, because Mercury will make a retrograde process. It will have a retrograde experience in the sign of Leo. And so, because it is, from our perspective on Earth, slowing down and then moving back in the zodiac and then stopping and then slowly moving forward again, it's going to be there for a little while. And so, this emphasizes our thought process, our communication, our contemplation, particularly around self expression, around giving and receiving affection, around generosity, around authentic communication and creative communication, creative self expression. And these are all Leo qualities. And so we're not at the retrograde yet. We're going to talk more about that. The actual retrograde happens in Leo from July 18th through August 10th. So we have a bit of time, and we're going to talk more about it as we get closer to that. But I want you to be thinking already that this movement is already starting to emphasize the the contemplation process around Leo themes, the contemplation of how you feel like you can authentically express yourself. Um, I think Mercury in Leo is also so much around um, how we feel seen, how we feel perceived, how we feel heard, literally, as well as the emotional feeling of feeling like we are receiving attention from other people, and how, and all of the complicated feelings that can come up with that. So this happens Thursday, and Mercury moving into Leo means that Mercury is immediately making a trine to Saturn and Neptune. So again, we're getting Saturn Neptune activated here. And Mercury is also immediately making an opposition to Pluto. And so there's a nuanced, multifaceted, multi-flavored experience of Mercury here, because it's connecting in with so many planets. And so, of course, this is all around our mind, our thought process, our communication, how we make sense of things, the things that we're thinking about, all Mercury stuff. And so with Mercury trine to Saturn, this is a subtle, easily flowing aspect. Trines typically don't require anything of us, but we can take advantage of it. So Mercury trine to Saturn, there's this possible increased ability to focus, to materialize your thoughts or communication processes, or to Mercury Saturn also really signals intense analytical thinking. So there's a great deal of focus here with Mercury and Saturn that's possible. Mercury trine Neptune, in contrast, is emphasizing imagination, creative thinking, and an ability to deepen into altered states of consciousness or meditation, or even just deepening into the feeling of your dreams or daydreams. And Mercury is also opposite Pluto, which is a more dramatic, forward-facing kind of energy that I think we would feel a bit more. So Mercury opposite Pluto tends to show a time where we have intense and very penetrative thoughts and thinking and communication. Pluto brings a sense of depth and intensity and even like a seeking. Pluto has this gritty, real, raw quality to it. And when we have Pluto in contact with a planet, typically that planet feels more alive. It feels more dramatic, more intense, more concentrated. There's almost a feeling of pressure sometimes, I think, with Pluto. Um, this like life, death, rebirth experience. And so when we have Mercury here, we can think about the the thought process, the communication process, having more intensity and depth to it. So, deep conversations, intense research, intense introspective contemplations. I think Mercury Pluto can also show where we really analyze a situation, maybe possibly very intensely or very compulsively, or in a way that like Mercury Pluto can kind of have like a controlling kind of tinge to it. And um, it can also show where there's maybe a tendency for rumination because there's that intense sort of like mentally grabbing onto something and not being able to let it go until it feels like we have reached a solution or we have reached the bottom or we have reached a sense of satiation. And Pluto is a deep well. And so I would say for Mercury Pluto, um, it really helps us to find a place to focus our mind that feels regenerative. Um, and if there's something that you're really interested in or that you want to get to the bottom of, how can you do that in a way that feels like it is, yeah, regenerative, like it is giving you energy versus taking your energy? And Pluto is the planet of rebirth. It's the planet of transformation. It's the planet that shows where um, something comes up, and then there is this um, often composting or decomposition in order for new life to come forward from that. It is this falling away and then that becoming fertilizer and then something new sprouting. And so I also wonder here, what do I wonder? I also wonder here if there is, like with Sun Neptune, if there's something maybe that's falling away, some sort of way of looking at things, some thought process that is coming forward in your psyche so that you can chew on it and process it, and then so that it can be transmuted and changed. There's something that's happening here. Okay, last aspect that I'll talk about for today is we have Venus in Taurus making a square to the asteroid goddess Pallas. So Pallas is a symbol of strategic defense, strategic advocacy, fighting for something in a way that is in contrast to Mars, which sometimes Mars can be more about the physical force of things. Pallas is more about that analytical process of, okay, like how can I be strategic where I'm thinking about what I want the outcome to be here and how can I advocate in a way that is well thought out and well planned. Palace is also connected to the arts and anything that is creative or where you're using your hands to do something that is creative or crafty in some kind of way. And so Venus square Palace feels like finding a way to channel your creative inspirations in a way that feels free and spontaneous and strategic at the same time. And I'm saying that because it's Venus with Uranus together, square Palace. So there's something here about allowing what is in your heart to come forward and at the same time contemplating how this is going to land or how this is going to be received. Okay, so that's the astrology for this week. I wonder how this is sitting with you. I have 3 reflection questions for you to sit with, and I'm going to pull some tarot for you as well. So, reflection question number 1, what is emerging from you at this time? What is emerging? And double question, how can you create space for whatever it is, this new beginning, without rushing it or pushing it? So, what do you feel coming forward, and how can you allow it to come forward, really? Reflection question number 2, what defines you? How would you define or describe yourself? And number 3, what are you feeling called to contemplate more deeply? And this is really getting into, I think, a couple things, but particularly the Mercury Pluto. What are you feeling called to contemplate more deeply? Okay. So I have a new deck here that I haven't used very much. So um, you have to tell me how you like it. Okay, so if you're not already, I invite you to get into a place that feels comfortable where you can either close your eyes or focus on something in front of you that feels soothing, and to imagine yourself in a beautiful, protective sphere of light. This light can be any color that feels good for you. It can even, maybe instead of a color, take on a texture or a temperature. Whatever feels good to you, knowing that you are contained within this beautiful, peaceful, protective bubble. You may wish to invite in the presence of your spiritual guidance team, ancestors, whoever or whatever is that protective guiding force for you. And ask that they are here with you now to help you, to protect you, and to communicate with you in a way that you can easily understand right now. Mm. And then bring your focus to your heart. And from your heart, with this curious wondering, maybe a question or a scenario or a wondering arises for you. Good. Okay. So I'm picking 3 cards, and You may wish to pick a number between 1 and 3 to have that card be special to you. Okay. So this is, what is this called? This is the Divine Diversity Tarot. And so first card is the Justice card. And justice can be about a couple of things. In this deck, there is an image of a person in this really gorgeous deep purple dress, and they have a golden crown that sort of almost looks like it continues into like a purple headdress sort of situation. And in the classic justice fashion, they're holding a set of scales and then an upright sword, and they're sitting on a throne. And they look very regal and serious. So, justice tends to be about, of course, justice, what feels fair, morals. Justice can also be about making decisions and finding a path forward and finding your way forward and finding what feels. Actually, as I'm talking about this, I think that sometimes psychologically, justice can be about finding what feels ethical for us, for yourself, what feels ethical, what feels like you are acting within your own sense of integrity, and sometimes grappling with where that feels complicated, and that often justice can sometimes be argued in many different directions. And gosh, this just feels like such a strong card. Like there is this, I don't know, it makes me wonder if there's something at stake here for you, if there's something that you're deciding, or something that I think sometimes justice can show where it feels like there's something outside of our control, and there is a hope or a wish for balancing of the scales. Um, so I don't know, there's something here around finding a connection to morality or to balance, to what feels right in a certain scenario. So let's look more at what's happening here. Okay. Second card is the Five of Cups. And in this card, there's an image of a person who's looking at three cups that are pouring out liquid, and then there's two sort of like hovering cups behind them. And then in the distance, there is a bridge and a castle. And so often this card can be about disappointment, around things like not working out the way that you want it to. The thing with this card though always is that it's very much about this person's attention. So in this card, typically the person is looking at the cups that have spilled. And there is disappointment, a feeling of loss, a feeling of like, ugh, like that did not go the way I wanted it. Um, and this card is speaking to the cups behind the person that have not spilled, and also this castle that is on the horizon, this castle that I think they're headed to. And so this card, when I see it, is typically a reminder to turn around and to look at what else is available to you, and that your perspective, your focus has such an impact on how you're moving through the world, and your perspective has um, such power over your emotions. And I think also this card can say that it's important to notice how discouragement or things not working out, like how that impacts you, and that just because something didn't work out doesn't mean it's the end of the story. And so I actually think it's quite interesting that we have the justice in combination with this. So there's like something here. There's almost, I feel, with justice, like a hope or a wish for things to come out a certain kind of way. And Five of Cups is like, I don't know, Five of Cups kind of feels like working with the possibility of disappointment, the possibility that things didn't work out in the way that you wanted them to. Um, and I'm also really feeling the Sun Neptune with this card too, like Neptune being about working with the loss of the ideal and managing those feelings. And then the last card is the Four of Pentacles. Okay, interesting. And I pulled this reversed. Um, so the Four of Pentacles tends to be about our financial security, um, how we feel financially or physically secure, or financially or physically insecure in some way. I think it's also very much about the flow of energy in our lives and how we feel either like we're taken care of, and a sense of security, comfort, and ease versus insecurity, or versus that sort of like dysregulation response when our physical needs are not met, or where it feels like we have to be trying really hard in order to continue to exist. And so that I pulled this reversed, there's something here. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm feeling is the Justice card is a major arcana card. It's one of the um, major arcana cards we can think of as um, big picture, long term cards. And so there's something here around either decisions or something working out in a way that involves ethics or balance or a sense of justice. Um, I'm even thinking psychologically, to me, the Justice card feels very much like polarities and like having two opposing qualities in oneself. And so it also makes me wonder if this is speaking to integrating different parts of yourself, where it's like maybe there's one way of being that you're like, yeah, that's how I am. But then there's the opposite way of being where you're like, oh, that's not how I am. That's, how other people are. And maybe there's a shadow or unconscious quality of that that is wanting to be integrated here, that the scales are wanting to balance out so that it's not so much all or nothing, that it's not so mm, polarizing. In psychology, we would call this splitting, where it's like one way of being is seen as all good, and another way of being is seen as being all bad. So there's this sort of finding a way to see parts of yourself that maybe have been rejected, possibly, and that, that's like a confrontational process, that it can be disappointing to see the way that maybe either we or we have disappointed ourselves, or maybe others have disappointed us, or just the way that things didn't quite work out. And I think always with the Five of Cups, so important to remember that there is more to the story here, that there is something else that maybe something else that is calling for your attention. And then through this process, like through this process of self-discovery and integration, there is something that brings you a greater sense of rooting into yourself and a greater sense of security. And I think that's why the Four of Pentacles is reversed, is because it's not quite clear what is coming into being yet. That's what I have to say about the astrology of this week. I hope that you found this helpful, and always such an honor to read the astrology and the tarot for you. I am wishing you a most easeful week going ahead, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.